my life before that wasn't that great, you know? Having IQ, having intelligence, knowing 2 plus 2 doesn't mean if you're shallow, if you're self-centered, if you're operating from kind of like a low frequency. And so through that spiritual practice and through that need, that desire to survive, like to like either die or get better, you know, I had to come to terms with all these other things. And then I've spent the last 15 or so years working on my character in one way or another. Because it's just like an SF. You're only as good as your last stop, you know? And you can't rest on your past successes. I can't rest on like, oh, I was wise once. Like, you got to deploy that every day, you know? And it's just a better way to live.
Today on the Asset Mindset Podcast, we have a very special guest, Magnus Johnson. So Magnus, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself to the Asset Mindset Podcast?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Daniel. I appreciate it. My name is Magnus Johnson. I'm the founder of Mission 22. I'm a former Green Beret. I did 3 tours, but one of them was as a combat engineer. I'm also a coach and an author.
Well, let's plug your book, man. What'd you write?
I wrote a book called The Men We Make. It was a novel. It follows a kid named Darren, and it's kind of a coming-of-age story, and it's written in 2 parts. The first part, his family isn't present. They're addicted. They're abusive. They're selfish. You know, they're downtrodden. And it ends, you know, I don't want to give it away, but you see the consequences of this lack of love, this lack of support, this lack of masculine guidance and leadership for the main character, for the protagonist. And then in part 2, I reimagine the story. And the part 2, what if the people gave a shit? So they're not necessarily smarter. They don't have more money. They live in the same zip code. They have some of the same fundamentals. They just make different choices and care. And just that enough has a completely profound different ending for Darren. And so I thought it was a relevant book to kind of where we're at, some of the issues that young men are having today when you look at some of the statistics. I also think that, you know, men as a whole, or young men, you know, they get a lot of, as they should, you know, you got to be accountable. You got to stand behind what you do, but these young guys need a ton of support, and it doesn't just come from one person. It comes from the whole community. And I wanted to show what happens when men are formed, guided, led, and have boundaries and discipline and structure in their life. And that's the novel. It's called The Men We Make.
Nice. I love it. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create and make better people, better men, better women. Anybody that wants to have a better mindset. We're about transformation, not just motivation. So you've brought up Mission 22. You're a co-founder of that, correct?
That's right. Yep. Co-founder.
So talk to me about how that helped you overcome your own battles by helping others.
That's a perfect example is like when we first started out, we did this large leaf sculpture in Indiana. So it's a big art installation. We had no money, and it was just me and the guys building it with the local community and local artists. And I had to go to the store. What's the store? Menards or something? I think it's Menards. You guys are, you know that save big money when you shop. So I was struggling. I hated crowds. You know, you go into the aisles and there's just thousands of options. The bright lights, you know, the fluorescent lights, people, the song on repeat. And I had to go there and buy like welded rods, disc grinders, whatever. And I hated it. I mean, I remember one time I went into the store, got in there, just stood at the aisle staring, completely lost in what I'm supposed to do. I went back to the truck. I don't smoke anymore, but I did then. Had a cigarette, hyped myself up, and like went back in there. Now, why does this story matter? Because I would have not done that for myself. I did that because I was part of a team. I had promised the town. People entrusted me to build this thing, and it wasn't acceptable for me to not come back without the grinding discs, the welding rod, or whatever was on the list. And so just staying at it, staying committed, putting in effort over and over and over. That's kind of how I got myself back into being able to go to super centers in the middle of the day, you know, but in the beginning I hated it.
No, it makes total sense. So you're saying accountability to others helped you push yourself.
Absolutely. For myself, I'd have gone later in the night or like, oh, I don't feel like it, go tomorrow. I don't know if Amazon was as big then as it is now, but I would have gone on Amazon and just waited, but because I wanted to, like, yeah, I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to get the materials, I'll be back in an hour, we can keep working. The little things like that all the time because I was accountable to the others. I was on a team. I had a purpose and a mission greater than just myself, and I was willing to push through. And I could push through. Some people need to take a knee, but for me, I could push through. And I kept doing it until my bandwidth got a little bigger and bigger and bigger until one day I noticed it wasn't an issue. One day I wanted to go to Menards.
Nice, nice. Well, I'm glad you want to get out there and do things again. So let's talk about how to find a team then. Like you found Mission 22 and were able to put your energy there. What if someone's stuck and feeling alone? Where do they find a team?
That's a great question. Well, I think being authentic. I think thinking of other people besides just yourself. One of the analogies I have is this is kind of more for entrepreneurs, but a headache. A regular person gets a headache and then they want it to go away. And they will pay whatever, they'll buy aspirin, they'll buy Advil, and they'll take the medicine and then the headache goes away and then now they're fine. An entrepreneur in the middle of their headache will be thinking, I wonder if other people have this. I wonder like if I could help others with this problem. And then they invent a product and then they sell it. So the idea is if you think of others, if you have other people on your mind and in your heart and you're paying attention, it widens your view and you can empathize and you can see and you connect. And if you're being authentic with a desire or a passion and you're thinking of others, naturally people will be drawn to that and you'll be drawn to other people. And through that connection, through those relationships, if they're positive, especially with men, at a certain point, there needs to be some sort of action. I like to take action. So it could be putting a team together to go on a run. It could be putting a team together to build a business. It could be putting a team together to clean up a community. So when you're thinking of others, you have willingness and you want to be a service, it's natural to kind of put together a team. And then from there, there's a million books on the execution of it or as an organization. But I think spiritually and energetically, you got to be thinking about other people.
Yeah. So let's talk about the team now. You're out there, you build a team. What type of team do you want to build? Who do you want to surround yourself with?
I want to surround myself with people who care. I want to surround myself with people who, pragmatically can do things and know things that I'm not good at. I want to surround myself with people that have that believe in God, that care about, what God wants, what God's compelling them to do, because that mission, that purpose is always bigger than everyone. And that's a unit I want to be in, because that mission never dies. So people that believe spiritually what I do, people that care about other people and people that have skills that I don't have, and people that want to participate and contribute, not just for the feeling of success and achievement, but for, some altruism too. Everyone's got to make us, be successful and achieve something in life. But if that's your sole motivation, it ends up being kind of limited. But if there's some altruism, a spiritual component to it, and people that can contribute in ways that I can't, like that's a great team.
So you get people that help you grow in areas maybe you're weak.
You grow, collaborate, augment, just like on an ODA, you got your captain, you got your team sergeant, and, they're obviously overall in charge. But then, when you get up to an IED as me as a Charlie, then for a moment, I'm in charge, obviously if they need to call me off or whatever they can, but the battlefield's mine for this one spot, for this one moment. And then when when the IED's been reduced or the threat's gone, bam, they're back in charge, or it goes back to the Bravo or whoever's leading the patrol. And that's like a really mature and a really pragmatic way of kind of sharing this. Like someone's in charge, but then there's all these other people with all these skills. And when the problem falls in their lane, we support them. And then they're mature enough and humble enough to relinquish that control and then get back on supporting the team, whoever else is on point. And that's what I like.
No, I love that. Yeah, that team mentality, there's nothing like it. And I think a lot of veterans, when they get out, they struggle with finding a new team. They have a problem with the transition. They had their team, they had their people, they had their purpose, and then they get out. And let's talk about transitioning.
Yeah. Yeah, I was super arrogant about transitioning. I thought I was special, different. The way I grew up. I grew up in a van. My real dad was a musician. My stepdad was an entrepreneur. I joined a little later. I was 23, so I already had some time. I wasn't 18 straight into the military, so I assumed that I was going to be able to pick up right where I left off and go. I was looking forward to the freedom. I couldn't wait, blah, blah, blah. But there's a physiological, spiritual, mechanical, there's all these other barriers that they come up when that pressure is relieved. When that pressure is released, all these other issues sort of surface up. And I had to go through them. I had to pay attention to them. I couldn't just resist them or ignore them. I had to kind of embrace them, go through them, and think about them. Transition's really difficult for me, I can only speak for myself and then people I've heard in Mission 22. When you don't accept the reality of the situation, when you can't accept, so like on a team or in a squad or whatever it is, man, these guys are willing to die for you. They're willing to go through hell for you and you are for them. I mean, that's love. That's a form of the highest love, right? Well, everywhere else in civilian life, you're not going to get that kind of love because it's not this external pressure of war or great risk. I mean, there can be, but we've gotten used to this sort of trauma bonding, this great vision greater than ourselves, and ultimate sacrifice for everything, for others. That's not reciprocated the same in the civilian world. It can be here and there, but it's not going to be the same. So you have to kind of not hold back, but reframe reality based on where you're at. So like corporate life isn't the same level of commitment as it would be on an ODA. Now, the same effort for something you promised to execute, blah, 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 but not that same deep spiritual self-sacrificing, I'll jump on the grenade for you, right? Because they won't jump on the grenade for you. So why would you for them? But at the same time, for me anyway, there's like, you want to be your true self. And my true self does want to sacrifice for others, does want to be a part of a team, does want to go all in. So that goes back to understanding where I'm at, situational awareness. Who am I giving my loyalty to and who's giving their loyalty to me? And just because I'm in an office or in a job isn't the same thing as my own team that I build. So there's like layers of trust, layers of and it takes time to kind of become aware of that and get out of the habit of just giving it when you're on a life and death situation with a team. So we have to kind of rewire that and get some perspective. And that takes some time.
Absolutely. You're speaking truth, brother. And I'm proud of you for sharing your story and your messages. You touched on reframing. Let's get more into that and dive into that because I think some people don't know how to reframe things. Do you have any tips or tricks or?
Well, yeah, I think becoming an observer is part of that. So, okay, entrepreneurship, there's working in your business and there's working on your business, right? And you need to know the difference. I'm building a business. I'm looking at my systems. I'm looking at my QuickBooks. I'm looking at my product. You're working on it. I'm working on my team. Who's where? Do they work well together? Then you're getting on the phone and doing sales calls. You're working in it. And right, I can't remember who said that, but it's an entrepreneur that wrote a book, pretty famous guy. So that's not mine. That belongs to somebody else. But the idea of working in it or on it, I've kind of taken that and like applied that to my personal life and to this idea of reframing, right? Like, okay, am I working on my marriage or am I in it? Am I expressing am I working on my PTS or am I in it? Am I working on my fitness or am I in it? So like when I go to the gym in the middle of a WOD, I'm in it. When I get home, before I go or after, and I research and study and look at some of the minute, now I'm working on it. So if you can become an observer, then you have a little bit of a moment where you can reframe. First, you have to see it. First, you have to look for it. Then you see it. Then you take that, never miss an opportunity to train. Then you take that opportunity in that moment, hopefully there's a little space between the flash and the bang, you can kind of expand that out with more practice. But when you start getting these moments, because you're trying to observe your behavior, your feelings, what you're doing, then you can be like, no, I want to do this differently. And then you want to look at it differently. And then you want to assume less and you want to be curious and you want to reframe. And that gives you control. That gives you agency. That controls your breath. That makes things not personal. And then you have a better sense of calm and a better sense of control. And then if you start stringing those together, you got a better quality of life, in my opinion.
Absolutely, man. You're preaching it. That's what I teach people and coach people on with the asset mindset. And I mention all the time, you don't have to be special forces to have the asset mindset. As you know, to be a Green Beret or a special operator, you have to have the asset mindset where you're positive, you're taking ownership, you're willing to sacrifice, you're surrounding yourself with good people, and you're giving back to others. And that's what you're preaching. And I think that's fantastic. And your insights are powerful. You also mentioned the word curiosity, and I like that as a buzzword. You want to dive more into that?
Yeah, man. Like if I'm curious, there's another book I read that is called Nonviolent Communication. I don't know if you ever heard of that one, but
No.
so it's like you're having a communication. Let's say it's with a spouse or at work or whatever. Instead of like somebody says something that pisses you off, and you're like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Well, be curious. So that's a moment where if you can reframe it, get into the observer, be curious. Hey, I noticed that when this came up, your tone changed. That makes me feel like maybe there's something wrong. Would you be willing to explain that to me? I didn't blame you. I didn't attack you. I didn't put it all on you. I just said I noticed. And then I was curious and I told you how it's making me feel, which is not a fact. It's just how I'm perceiving it. And I'm opening the door for you to speak your truth into it so that there can be clarity. And to do that, we've got to get out of being completely self-centered because other people exist and they got other crap going on. And we got to be curious about others, where they're coming from, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. Why did I react that way? That's the observer. That's the reframe. So curiosity is connected to all that as the motivating element to be curious about why others do what they do. Why am I thinking the way that I do? That's a trigger. That's an ingredient in the observer mindset. To having that observer to be able to reframe that's what I feel anyway. So I try to be curious about all kinds of things because half the time, you think you know, but you don't.
Absolutely, brother. And I like how you take curiosity to another level where you are not just curious and stepping back and pondering things. You use curiosity in communication with others.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the value of good communication.
Dude, it's everything. Uh, Business moves at the speed of trust, and then how do you develop trust? By communicating love, by communicating purpose, by communicating your values, and then by showing that with your actions. That also communicates it, right? Because the words I think are like 20% of how we communicate. There's a body language, tone, demeanor, disposition. Like this is a really powerful piece of how we communicate. And a lot of times we're unaware of our own presence, special forces guys, especially, like we have a presence that other people, because of their own crap, internalize differently than what we're saying. I don't know if you've experienced that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So when I'm out in the world in different environments, talking with different people, I don't know the battlefield. I don't know their backgrounds. I don't know their needs, their wants, their desires. Hopefully I know mine. But if I could be curious, then I'm a willing team member. I'm focusing on the other person, not myself, which is immediately disarming, which is also like, hey, show me a little bit who you are, where you are in a non-judgmental way, so that we can move closer together in a team, so that you can figure out if we want to support each other, we want to do all this. And so curiosity, altruistic curiosity, greases the wheels for communication because people feel it if you're full of shit. People feel it if you're defensive. People feel it if you're being fake. If you're just faking curiosity, well, that's a curveball. That's not a fastball. They can feel it, and it feels different when it comes in. So getting to that point of genuine curiosity puts the truth on the ball so that communication can happen with less barriers, because people have an instinct to sniff it out and they immediately get defensive, and it changes their view, their perception, and then yours too. And next thing you know, you're completely off. So it's energetic. It matters. And people people focus so much on saying the right thing, but not saying it with the right tone, inflection, and meaning, which comes from the heart. And people can pick up on that. They might not be able to articulate it, but they know, they feel it, and that matters. And then that will greatly impact your communication for better or worse.
No, I love it. So I want to ask, all this knowledge that you have and that you're sharing now, was there a particular event in life or a moment in time where you kind of changed and took ownership of your mindset?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Uh, my last tour, pretty salty. I ended up getting sober on my last tour. So in getting sober, I had to come to terms with God. You know, one of the steps is to turn your life and your will over to God as you understand him. So that means I'm no longer, TC, right? Now God's TC. So when you start measuring yourself, your actions, your behaviors against that, the flaws, the selfishness, the fear, the shame, the greed, whatever it is, really sticks out. And you either give it up, you either give up that spiritual practice or you start to change. And my life before that wasn't that great, you know. Uh having IQ, having intelligence, knowing 2 plus 2 doesn't mean shit if you're shallow, if you're self-centered, if you're operating from kind of like a low frequency. And so through that spiritual practice and through that need, that desire to survive, like to like either die or get better, I had to come to terms with all these other things. And then I've spent the last 15 or so years working on my character in one way or another. Because it's just like an SF. You're only as good as your last stop, you know? And you can't rest on your past successes. I can't rest on like, oh, I was wise once. Like you got to deploy that every day, and it's just a better way to live. It's more rewarding. It's more exciting. There's more opportunities that happen. It's a better adventure. So it's not just like, okay, I'm going to be nice now. No, it's like a better way to live. It's way more exciting. So I'm all about it.
Love it. Love it, brother. And one of the things I want to touch on now is grace. So, like when we make mistakes, or you're saying you weren't living the way you're supposed to, let's talk about the power of grace.
Yeah, man. So he who has been forgiven much has much love. I don't know if you've heard that, but God's grace for me and other people's grace for me can really make you reflect and find humility pretty quick when you start to get to the reality like, okay, I've been given a lot of forgiveness. I've been given a lot of grace. That's because of love. And once you really accept that and come to terms with that, then you've got to give it out yourself. And then when you start giving grace, you're able to give yourself grace more too, and then you can then it goes back to now you're observing, now you're reframing, now you can be curious because everything isn't personal. Some things are, but a lot of things are just out there, just happening. And so grace, I mean, where would we be without it? I guess it depends on your worldview, but for me, without grace, I wouldn't be nothing.
No, I totally agree. And I think people sometimes, a lot of times, think that grace is just out there or given to them, but you also have to give grace and give yourself grace. Understand we all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. So move on. Don't keep beating yourself up.
Well, that's the beauty of grace. It's kind of like a rising tide lifts all boats. I don't know, like to receive grace, you got to give it kind of. It's just one of those things where it's this unique thing where if it's given, it's received, it's given, and you grow, they grow. It's a beautiful thing. It's a special thing, and it's given freely, but you always got to work for it too. But it doesn't mean your works will get it for you, but you do got to pursue it, but it is also given free. And that's how you know it's spiritual, is because it's a little bit of oxymorons.
Yeah, absolutely. And some things we just can't wrap our heads around as people. And you just got to do the best you can and have faith.
Well, you don't need to intellectualize everything. Sometimes things just need to be accepted for what they are. Sometimes the mind gets in the way of the truth. The mind gets in the way of growth. We have a heart, we have a gut, we have a body, we have a spirit, we have a soul, we have others. There's a lot more to who we are than just our mind. Because the mind, this is my opinion, It's wired. The heart pumps blood. Boom. It's its job. Keeps the blood going. Well, the mind pumps thoughts. Imagine like ruminating about a blood that was pumped. Like, oh, I wonder about that blood, But we ruminate on a thought that passed or a feeling that passed because we think that's who we are. But really, the brain is just giving you options. It's like a counsel. Here's a choice. Here's an option. Here's an option, and they tend to be self-preserving. Because negativity is like Velcro and positivity is kind of like Teflon. And when we have a life of trauma and fear and high stress, it's very easy for us to stick to the negative, focus on it, ruminate on it, avoid it so it never happens again, or control the situation so it never happens again. And then that becomes our mental framework until we can be the observer, right? So everything we're talking about here is like this loop, and we just have to keep practicing. And with practice, it gets a little easier, and you will fail and fail often, but how quickly can you get back into the practice of it? And then that's the key. I don't know if that answered that question. I kind of got on a little tangent there.
No, it's good, man. I love, that's what we're here to do, is to go on tangents, share our feelings, share our heart, what we're guided to share. And I like how you said positivity is Teflon. Can you get into that a little more?
Yeah, man. Like, so, when we think back in the way past, we tend to like remember the good things. But then when we think like in your daily life, if you see a stick on the sidewalk, you might jump because it's a snake, That's an example. Like one time I was walking on a trail and a snake bit my trekking pole, right? Another time I was walking on a trail and there was a rattlesnake. So I don't want to die. My brain doesn't want to die. My ego certainly doesn't want to die, right? So if dangers happened or pains happened, it's letting me know, like, hey, watch out. Hey, what about that? Wait, what about this? It's doing its job. The problem becomes when I think that's actually who I am rather than an option. When I just immediately react and respond to that negativity, that hardwiring to keep me alive. There are moments when you need to do that, right? Let's use some common sense, but I don't need to do that in my kitchen with my wife. I don't need to do that in a corporate meeting. I don't need to do that at the gym with, people. I need to be operating out of positivity, and I have to get the 10,000 rep thing. I have to put way more reps in positivity to get that neural pathway to solidify than that stick on the sidewalk, because that one negative threat, that's got free real estate for 20 years, right? But like, hey, being kind to people, saying hello, being generous, like I need a lot of reps to make that a habit. So if I think of negativity being something really sticky, then I know to get as few of those as possible. And I think if positivity is something that's like doesn't stick, then I know I need to put in a lot more reps to make that one stick. So that's how I kind of visualize it.
Okay. No, that's a great analogy. I think the listeners will get something from that. And speaking of getting something from, I want listeners, if you're out there, pause, go in the description, check out what Magnus is doing with Mission 22, like, subscribe, and share this with someone that you think needs to hear it. So Mission 22, tell us more about it and how can people get involved?
Yeah, Mission 22 is a national veterans charity. We started off in 2011, 12-ish, when I found out about the VA statistic. I didn't believe it at first. There's been a lot of arguments, and some people say the rate's higher, and some people say it's lower, and it's gone up and down. I can tell you anecdotally that it's pretty high, and it's pretty bad. But it's also kind of lame to just be focused on ruminating on the problem. And so what started off as an awareness campaign has now morphed into, we provide coaching for veterans and supplements and gym memberships and different programs that help you rewire your lifestyle. So like, for example, severe PTSD and therapy, that's some people need that for a period of time. But there's a lot of people who need someone to come alongside of them, be there. So the thing with a coach, as a coach, we're there to help the client go where they want to go. Mm-hmm. We're there to support the client in their journey. We're there to keep the client accountable how they want to be held accountable. And so one of the biggest I think beauty's of Mission 22 is we went with health and wellness coaching, life coaching, with coaches that have experience with veterans, but also, with like low sugar diet, movement, health, gut health, because a lot of Americans got low T. They're unsatisfied with material lifestyle. They're lacking energy, purpose. And so, and we're also obsessed with mental health, mental health, mental health. But man, what happens if you just get up at a certain time? What happens if you eat right? What happens if you stretch? What happens if you go to the gym? What happens if you take your magnesium? What happens if you hit your daily devotional? Well, these habits stack over time, and your T goes up, your energy goes up, your resiliency goes up. You've made the goals and you've reached them. So now your self-respect goes up. And then the minute that happens, now you have more capacity. So I think, we do a ton of events. We have ambassadors, we have monuments. We've done all this stuff. But the biggest thing I'm excited about is the relationship with the veteran and the coach. So the veteran is in charge. The veteran's got an expert if they ask for that expertise. And then they can change their lifestyle. They can change their habits because they want to. So it's not prescribe and treat. It's recruit and guide and mentor and support, but as an equal, not as somebody who's above you. And that is very empowering when you go through that process and your life transforms. And then the other beauty I'll add is that you did it. It wasn't the expert that did it. You did it. And you won't forget that. And it'll change your life.
Absolutely. And a good coach, that's what they do. They don't just boss you around and tell you what to do. They help you and mentor you to figure out what it is you need to do. So you're coming up with your own solutions, because anybody can tell anyone else, hey, you need to diet and exercise, go to the gym. Yeah, that doesn't go anywhere. That's surface stuff. If you want to get deep, it's kind of like us with, what we did in unconventional warfare, whatever. You plant seeds, you let other people come up with their ideas, and they then develop their plan of action. You help and you mentor that, but it's their plan, their course of action, which is so powerful. And I think that's what I find when you're working with someone, that's when it sticks. Because if you just go in there and boss someone around, no, you have to get into their goals, their desires, and it has to become their thoughts and beliefs, because beliefs are so powerful. You want to talk about beliefs?
Yeah, like if you tell what you tell yourself, like that goes back to working in it or on it, right? Like who's the narrator? Is it that fear-based, self-centered Teflon type of thing? Or is it the observer that's curious, right? And whatever you repeat and you tell yourself, whether it's subconscious or even or conscious, like you start to believe that. And our words have the power to kill and the power to heal, even if we just say them to ourselves. And I also would say that this gets a little woo-woo-y, but I believe that like the resonance of truth has a cellular effect, has power in it. And when we tell ourselves the truth, when we say something like, well, not yet versus I can't, we're building in this infrastructure to gain more power, to gain more grace, to gain more peace, to gain more hope. And it becomes a self-momentous thing. And then it's also internal motivation versus external motivation, right? I'm doing this because I want to, not because I have to or I've been told. And again, so now you have internal motivation, now you're observing how you speak to others and yourself. Now you have control over the habits you're going to build. Then your attitude changes. Now you got more energy. And then it just goes like a snowball, man. And it's a beautiful thing to watch. I love it. Also, I'll add, culturally, it's important for veterans too. How we heal is just as important that we heal, right? Because if we heal in a way that makes us feel weak, makes us feel, cowed, makes us feel less than, that healing, maybe it's like, okay, we're okay, but it's not thriving. It's not joyous. It's not fulfilling. So I like to offer healing that has the potential to be, powerful, not only for the individual, but then the message to the larger demographic as a whole. How we heal is as important as healing for others, for the example we set to others, for the example we set to our families. Again, take everything I say with, some common sense. Hey, some people need medication. Some people need like in-depth psychiatric care, but a lot of us don't, but we need to tell ourselves a different story. We don't need to go around talking about how broken we are. We need to say, hey, we're in a phase, we're in a time, and I'm excited about redrawing the canvas. I'm excited about what I can create now that I have to start over. That's a lot more powerful than just always lamenting on who I was or where I was. Forget it. Don't be ashamed of it, but what's next? Who can I be when I reinvent myself? Like me writing the book or me doing Mission 22 or whatever it is. You with your book and the podcast, you're reinventing yourself. That's inspiring. That's motivating. That's opportunistic. That's joyous. You're curious and your life will transform.
Absolutely. And there's science behind it. I mean, look how much science is coming out on neuroplasticity and how you can actually rewire your brain and your
100%.
thoughts and your neurons. And you're spot on with the more you can think positive and change that, it's like a flywheel effect. It just starts building momentum, or the snowball that you make and you roll down the hill and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the power of positivity. And once you can start to turn that flywheel, man, it can be life-changing.
It can, man. And then people they're so achievement based instead of process based. They're so comparing themselves to others instead of the joy of the process of building your own life, And so that flywheel gets spinning, and then people rob their own joy because they're looking at somebody else's podcast or somebody else's novel, somebody else's. Don't do that. Be the hero in your own story, man. Choose your own adventure and make yourself the main character. Who gives a shit who ran what? I ran a half marathon the other day. It was slow as hell, but it was my adventure. This is my novel, and I wrote it, and I'm excited about it. I'm not comparing that to like New York Times bestseller. That's their journey. That's their fun. I hope they're successful. I want to do what I want. I'm the hero in my story. And I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I think a lot of people are always looking out and comparing rather than just enjoying the process that they get to be involved in, which is exciting.
Yeah, I love that. And it comes down to ownership. You need to own your life, own your process, own your way of thinking, own your beliefs. Ownership is so powerful.
Yeah. I haven't read it as a confession. Was it Extreme Ownership or something like that? I haven't read the book, but
it's not my book, so that's okay.
Yeah, right. But I noticed this with like people, my family, right? Like my wife, the kids and stuff, like, oh, well, this happened to me. And then I noticed that I'm always thinking like, well, this happened. And not a ding on them. I just noticed it. And like, I noticed that there's people where things happen to them. And then there's people where things happen. And then there's a step further where like, yeah, things happen, but there's choices I made. There's patterns I established. There's decisions and habits and things that all kind of lead up to this. And when you can move from this happened to me to this happened to then ownership of it, I think that's a way to kind of like move through that. Like if you get in a car accident, sometimes it's completely the other person's fault and it happened to you. But most of the time, maybe you slowed down, maybe you kind of rolled through that red light. Maybe you were driving too fast, like whatever. There's a difference between it happened to you and it happened. And I think that goes back to working in it and on it. And then I think that also connects to curiosity and observer and reframing. When you start to stop feeling like a victim, stop thinking the whole world revolves around you, have some ownership of your lane, but then also don't, we can, I don't know about you, but guys like me can also take it too far where then there's no like extreme ownership of stuff that's completely not your fault. And then, I think sometimes we gotta, how do I say this without sounding corny? Like there's these mantras we go by, but they're not always 100%. And you won't see that 80-20 unless you're paying attention and being an observer. Because I think it backfires too if you just take ownership of things that aren't yours to take ownership of. And I think that a lot of people who are in the habit of just like extreme owner, like they don't actually see all the dynamics because they're kind of stuck. So one of the freedoms of kind of working through all this stuff is it gives you more mental bandwidth to not just be stuck in one way of thinking. You can decide how you're going to think in the situation, in the context of the environment. And you have that freedom and that ability to kind of be aware and pivot. So yes, ownership, 100%, but it's okay too to recognize when something is egregious or a problem that you didn't do. So I think ownership also goes with boundaries.
No, definitely. And I like how you're saying things happen. I try and work on this with people when I'm talking to them or helping shape their thought process and get out of a victim mentality or whatnot. There's different seasons of life. If you look at an oak tree during the winter, it has no leaves. It looks dead. There's nothing wrong with the oak tree. It's just in that season. It's not thriving and flourishing. It's dormant. But you know what? You wait a little bit and the sun comes out and it's spring and the buds start going. Next thing you know, it's got big leaves. It's making acorns and all the things. Like, life is full of seasons. And that goes back to grace a little bit, is like, you got to give yourself grace when you're not in that perfect season where everything is harmonious. Sometimes you just got to let things go and let things pass.
Well, I'm glad you said that because it triggered, I could speak back to that ownership thing again, right? Like, hey, we're in a really big inflationary period, you know, economic system is going through all kinds of changes. There's political things happening that are way above my pay grade. But it's affecting me and with the things I've built. Right now, I'm responsible for how I respond to that, but I'm not responsible for everything that was set in motion by these choices that are way above me. And I think that's having some awareness of what to take on, what to take ownership of, what season you're in, what you control and what you don't control. And then that's where you can deploy the grace. Hey, I don't control that. You know, don't make it an excuse like, oh, like people make working hard an excuse. Like, I love my family. It's not about money. But sometimes it's just an excuse not to work hard. Sometimes they actually mean it. It's up to you and the truth you tell yourself how you navigate that. Because there's things happening in this economy that I can't control that I'm have a tendency to take ownership of because I want to do a good job. But then if I'm not paying attention to what I can't control, I'm going to internalize all this negative crap that is just not for me to pick up. So ownership is something we need to have like a lot of awareness of. And if you do, it's a very powerful, powerful tool.
Absolutely. And I love how you keep saying observer and observation and step back and be objective. Are there any tips that you would give somebody to do that? Because a lot of people struggle, or if they're on their beginning of their journey or wherever they're at, and they aren't able to really step back and be an observer. How would you suggest someone start doing that?
Well, like a really simple way is like with a smartwatch, right? Like it tracks your stress. So like, let's say you got a problem with like conflict at home or someone at work or whatever. If you get used to kind of getting a spot check on your stress level, right? So like there'll be so many times where I know I'm right, but maybe I don't say it in a way that's nice, right? How do I say that? Like it's not what you said, it's how you said it, right? Going back to that tonality, that demeanor. So what I've gotten in the habit of doing, this is very simple on ramp, is checking out my stress. Okay, I've got to have a hard talk with my spouse. Or, hey, I'm going to ask my boss for a raise. Or, hey, I'm going to have this confrontation with somebody and I'm worried about the outcome or whatever. If you can get in the habit of looking at your physiological stress level, then take the opportunity, this is simple stuff, do the box breathing or do a meditation or whatever it is that you resonate with, but find a way that you can calm down your nervous system and then get that stress to go down. And when it goes down, then engage, then have that conversation. Because by that process, by that practice, you're getting self-control. You're staying in your lane. You can be confident that you didn't go into that conversation hot. So you can be confident in what you said and what you meant. And then you can also observe it in the middle of these type of situations. And if it starts to spike up really high, your frontal lobe is shutting down. You're losing control. You need to gain control because you care more about the relationship than being right. And that's a really simple way of kind of using as a guide rail until you can internalize it where you don't need the watch. You don't need to see the data. You can just feel it. And then if you can access that self-control with your breath, with your own awareness, you're connecting your mind and your body. You're getting control. You're taking ownership. and you're caring about other people because you're not just making them endure your high stress. So that's like a really simple way to kind of begin that process.
No, I like that. I like having a tool because a lot of people, especially nowadays and even younger generations, they love the tech. And you have a tool where you can monitor and look and see real time. Hey, what's your heart rate at? What's going
Yes.
on? That's powerful. That's great advice.
Well, then it connects the mind and it connects the body and the mind. And I don't think it's good to be reliant on tech. As soon as you can, once you get a sense of it, you don't need it anymore. But it's a great visual to see like, oh, I am stressed out. Well, I'm not gonna be productive like that. Let me do something. And then that habit will really change it'll move the needle for you later once you get in the habit of it.
Yeah, you're gonna start sensing on your own without the watch or without I got a ring, the monitoring ring. And, those things are great tools. Like you said, it helps me great for sleep, knowing, oh, okay, this is what I need to do. This is, my latency. I'm not falling asleep well because, I was on my phone too much or this or that. And setting things off. So yeah, having tools is fantastic, but the more you use them, the more you're going to be able to be aware of yourself and notice, hey, before that beeped or before I noticed my heart rate got at this level, I was feeling a hot flash or I was feeling a change, and you become independent. You don't need these things. You don't want these things to be a crutch.
No, you people get addicted to like the 10,000 steps and then they're checking their
Mm.
data. It's supposed to help you. Discipline gives you more freedom. It's supposed to give you context. It's supposed to give you some indicators, right? But then if you live by that, you just kind of traded one habit for another. Uh, but yeah, like what you just said about the sleep, that's an example of working on yourself versus just like, I woke up tired. I'm in a bad mood. Well, why? Because now you're the observer. Well, like, oh, I ate late. I watched the iPad in bed right before I went to sleep, so I didn't hit REM. That messed up my circadian rhythm. Now I got high cortisol. Like you start to see the pattern that your bad diet, your bad sleep habits is going to equal a bad day. And once you know the truth, you have to make a conscious decision like, okay, I want to have shitty days, or do I want to do something different about it? Because now you got the data. And so now you got to make a real decision.
Yeah, and making those decisions and having that awareness is game changing. That goes back to the ownership we're saying. You gotta own your life. You gotta own your power. You need to realize that you control your life more than anybody else. You can have all these wazoo things that tell you about your life, but guess what? You gotta get behind the wheel and drive your life to where you want to go.
Yeah, you got to respond and not react. Because if you're just reacting all the time, you have no control. And if you have no control, like, what are you doing? And to be able to respond, you gotta put in work on all the, before you go to bed, when you wake up, what you eat for breakfast, what you tell yourself, like all these little opportunities we have to kind of stack the deck in our favor. And that gives us the ability to respond and be curious. And like all the things I've kind of said, and like once you're operating from that place, you have more power. You can say no. You can say, yeah, it amplifies who you are so much. And you have the freedom too, because you're not always operating out of guilt or shame. Like, oh, I'm sorry I said that. Oh, I just had a bad day. Like, it's just these excuses. You get out of that loop too once you have ownership.
Yeah,
I
and
know
I
I'm,
like it. Go
you know
ahead.
what I mean? No, that like an example would be like, no, I meant what I said. If there was like an argument or something, but they're not going to be as defensive because you're not angry. You're confident. You're in your lane. You're balanced. And so there's more respect for you when you do that. Sorry.
No, you're good, brother. You're good. It's work, man. Do the work. I think a lot of people are busy just doing work, so to speak, for the money and the paycheck. They come home and they think, oh, I just got to decompress from work. And they don't work on themselves. If you're working hard at a job to make that business or your boss money or that company money, you know what? When you come home, put some time to work on yourself. That's what's going to change your life. That job, or we know with the army, you know what? You get out, that army train keeps going. All right, who's the next 18 Charlie is going to move to the company? Sergeant Major needs this. Okay, boom, boom, your slot's filled. You know, any job that you're working at, a regular job, that's what they're going to do. They'll just move on to the next person. So they don't work to make your dreams come true. You work to make your dreams come true. And that's going back to ownership, but people need to do that work and need to prioritize their own life and their own goals along with just working and making money.
Well, I think, when somebody's already fatigued and tired, you know, to to tell them like, hey, if you put in more effort, you'll be better, and like, no, like I need to rest. So what? There's delayed gratification versus instant satisfaction, right? Like, how willing are you to put in more work so that you can have real energy and freedom 6 months from now? And it's the same thing as like, hey, do you want this ice cream right now? Because you'll get a sugar buzz, you'll feel good, you'll get that dopamine, and you'll feel better right now, instant satisfaction. But if you go keto, primo, paleo, it's gonna suck. And then 6 months later, you're gonna feel great. No, very few people are like, oh yeah, sign me up for delayed gratification because they're in the habit of reacting rather than responding. And so if somebody can get into some sort of habit building where they can get it to stick, and then they reap the rewards of that discipline and that effort to feel that delayed gratification, and that's the beauty of a coach again, to help you get there. Once you experience that, you're going to not want to go back to the instant satisfaction. But it's a hard journey to do it one time. And that's the big lift. Let's do it one time so that you see it's true.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, building that first snowball, that's the hard part. And then once you get it rolling and going, and you're so spot on, a coach, a mentor, someone working with you can really help you because we talked about being an observer. Well, guess what? If you get a coach or a mentor, they're already on the outside. They're an observer from the start. So they're going to be able to see things you can't and share things with you that then you can be like, wow, I get that now. That's the power of a coach and a mentor.
They also listen on multiple levels, right? So there's like listening to the words you say. Then there's listening to kind of what's in between those words, your facial, your eyes, whether or not you're animated or excited. And then there's kind of listening on an even deeper level with like this intuition where you're observing, you can hear yourself observing the client, you can hear the client, you understand what's not being said. And then they also remember what's been said before. So now there's patterns. And then they say it back to you like, oh, well, you said this. And then you hear that back to you. Like, whoa, 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 no, no, no. So it's like, and then it really accelerates, it really accelerates personal growth. So many people don't understand the power of good coaching. And once they do, I think it's going to blow up even more because everybody should have a coach, whether you're a veteran or not, or an executive or not. It's so awesome. Such a good experience.
Yeah, it's life-changing. I know people have changed their lives and it's incredible to see. And it's almost in a weird way, kind of selfish to help somebody grow because it makes you feel good. Like the more you can help others, the better you feel inside. It's weird, you pay it forward and it comes back and it's a very powerful thing and just makes you want to help more people.
Yeah, I think, there is a little danger of getting like that codependent thing where like, oh, like, but that would be not a good coach, right? Where like they're only doing good if their client's doing good. A coach has to have good boundaries. A coach needs to know their worth. A coach needs to know whether the client's doing the work or not. But man, when they're really doing it and you're doing your role as a coach and they're winning, that's a wonderful feeling. It's a wonderful feeling. And you're not responsible. You just got to participate. And like, you can see the strength of the human spirit. You can see God at work. You can see hard work, amplify and multiply. And then it gives me more confidence and more excitement for what's possible in my life. So I think that's why I enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're coaching so that they don't need you anymore. Any good coach, that's one of the things I'm going to put myself out there, maybe get some hate with some of the psychologists that are out there. that just, oh, you got to come to me every week, every week, every week, every week. And it's like, no, you should be getting them to the point where they don't need you. That's what truly helping somebody is.
Well, you got an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset, right? And also, if your mortgage depends on people needing you, you might be biased,
Yeah.
right? And so that's another thing I love about coaching is that it's you want them to be free. You want them to not need you. Coaches believe that like they have value and there's new clients and there's new things and their win is your win because then that's your review, that's your testimony. And so, there's any profession or practice, you've got people who get stuck thinking that they're more important or what they're doing. They're not looking at the others. And even, how do I say this? People in altruistic work can get a savior complex, and then they start thinking their value's only in being a helper. And then they get this kind of codependent thing that's hard to spot because they are a helper. But then that's why there's so much high prevalence of burnout in social work, counseling, therapy, psychology. There's a high level of burnout. So I think this is a layman. I'm not a psychologist, but I think that the more that psychology kind of borrows some coaching things, the better it's going to get.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, I think that definitely there's lanes purely for psychologists and psychiatrists, 100%. But coaching, the fundamentals of good listening, the fundamentals of coaching, I think apply anyway.
Absolutely. Well, I got to thank you so much for being here and sharing all your wisdom, your mindset, and all the great things you're doing, especially with Mission 22. Magnus, you're an amazing human being. I'm proud of you, brother, for putting yourself out there. I'm grateful for you coming on the show. But before you go, is there anything you want to share?
Yeah, man. I'm really grateful for you and Denny, taking the time, helping me get on some of these podcasts. I've been doing Mission 22 for a long time. There's been big times and low times, but man, I really stepped out and wrote this book. I've been working on being able to write for a long time. And so to get some response from people in the community that want to take the time to interview me and share that is for me being a debut author. It's a vulnerable thing to write a book, man. And you really put yourself out there. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time and the interest to share it, talk about it, and especially with your community, it means a lot to me. And I'm really grateful.
My pleasure, brother. And everybody out there, don't forget to go in the description. You can find the links and you can support Mission 22. You can get Magnus's book. You can do it all. And of course, definitely follow, like, and share and send this to someone who needs to hear it. And more than anything, own your power.